to Psychedelics Today, everybody. This is Joe Moore coming at you from Breckenridge, Colorado, high up in the Rockies. And today on the show, we have Steve Hupp. Steve is the, main focus of this kind of docu-series that Vice has released on him facilitating ayahuasca sessions in the States. He's got a religious approach to ayahuasca, and as a result has some interesting things to say about religious status of psychedelics, and we're definitely going to get into that in the show. Like, I haven't actually recorded the interview yet. It starts in about 5 minutes from right now, so very excited about it. I think the show is going to be a big deal. I think it's huge in terms of how much they're promoting it. It's really, great film work, a great production company. I watched episode 1, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. Really appreciated it. It was exciting, elucidated, Steve's worldview around ayahuasca, kind of pretty core Amazonian style. I know there's a gazillion types of Amazonian ayahuasca religion, but this one, looks pretty good. So, check out the TV show. Again, Kentucky Ayahuasca. I'm sure you can find it on YouTube or something, or on Vice.com. So yeah, without further ado, a little bit of sponsorship stuff. Well, I guess it's not really sponsorship because it's us. If you want to support us, we would love your help. It costs quite a bit to keep the show running and growing, because we have big plans for the future of psychedelics in the world. So if you want to help us, if you really like the show and want to give back, there's a number of ways. We have a shop with t-shirts, books, cups, stuff like that, psychedelicstodayshop.com. If you want to give us a monthly donation, you can do that over at patreon.com/psychedelicstoday. If you want to really do us a favor, it's taking one of our classes for a fee. We've got a few pay classes that are pretty extraordinary, I think. We've even had a number of physicians tell us that they were really excellent, and we've kind of known that all along, but it's great to get validation from others. You can learn more at psychedelicstoday.com or psychedelicstoday.teachable.com. So we'd love to have you. And I think that's it. And, as always, tell friends about it whenever anything really sticks out and you really liked it and wanted to share it. That's probably the best compliment you can pay us. So thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy this episode with Steve Hupp. Hi, everybody. Today on the show, we have Steve Hupp, main, subject of Kentucky Ayahuasca, new show airing on Vice. Steve, is that the right way to put it? Main subject?
Well, I guess you could. I've been called the host of the docu-series. The main focus of, but really it's about what me and my family are doing.
Right. Okay, great. Yeah, it's clear watching at least episode 1 that it's not just you running the show here. It's a whole team. And you're taking kind of the lead position, but still quite a bunch of folks.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. I don't want anybody to get the misconception that it's all me, because it definitely isn't.
Right. So you have an interesting background, which is part of what makes the show so compelling, right? Like, you've got can you give us a little bit of an idea of your background before jumping into the psychedelic world?
Sure. My background's an attention grabber, if you will, but that's as far as it goes. Anytime you don't meet many people that can stand, look at you in the eye and go, "Hey, I was a career criminal," or "I was a bank robber," or "I'm a retired bank robber," if you will. And so, that immediately grabs attention. It also lays a strong foundation of, the kind of jerk that I was. And for lack of a better word, how big of an ass could I be? And it documented all that. I kind of jokingly say to some of my friends, this is the only job I've ever gotten because of my criminal record. And and then really that's the way it kind of turned out, because that's what drew the attention, was not only the change that we're helping people do, but the change that we have gone through.
Right.
And a little bit about my background. I'm sorry, I kind of got lost there. I was the near recent history was I was a bank robber, car thief, and many things in between. And that's what landed me in prison, was a bank robbery that went wrong. And that's what finally put me into the same space, if you will, of a Peruvian shaman. He was there for a myriad of different reasons, one of them being he had overstayed his visa and got caught up in the system.
Right. So he was probably doing some facilitation around the States.
Right. I mean, it wasn't like at that time I even cared what he was doing in the States. I want you to understand, at that time I didn't. If he had told me he was a shaman, it wouldn't have mattered to me. At the time that we met, it was later on, looking back on some of the things that he had kind of pointed me in the direction of, did I see the path being laid? You know what I mean? Hindsight's 20/20, and at the time I was blind to it all. But looking back, I see where Mother Aya was working with me for a long time.
Right. So he was kind of like subtly instructing you.
Yeah, I mean, well, you got to realize prison is a place of incredible boredom.
Right.
And occasionally it's a place of incredible violence and incredible excitement. So, out of boredom, we'd be talking. And, at first I got kind of locked onto him because he had a different outlook on life. And at the time, I thought he had a shortcut. I thought he had some pills stashed somewhere. I thought he had some drugs. So that's what drew my attention to him, because not only wasn't he ganged up, he wasn't grouped up. A lot of people get through prison, myself included. I didn't gang up, but I always had a group I ran with. Think of it like high school. You had your associates, your people that you hung with. And, but he wasn't even grouped up. He was pretty much a loner, and he was pretty much a recluse. But, in a convict's mind or a prisoner's mind, that also means prey. And that also means he was easy meat. And that's why I was looking at him. But the more I got to watching him and watching, everything about him and finding out as much as I could about him, because I was trying to find where he had his stash, I found out he didn't have a stash. He had a different way of looking at things, a different way of processing things. And I started listening when he spoke. And now at this time, to me, he's just Loopy. Okay. He's Guadalupe is his name, but I call him Loopy. And I'm like, Loop, a lot of the conversations we had were in short bursts, walking the track. And but he would drop bombs in your head that would go off a week later. You'd be thinking, all right, I get what you're saying now, Loopy. I see exactly what you mean. But, and at times it didn't mean I always agreed with it. I'm still in a criminal mindset. I'm still on survival mode. The only thing I cared about at that moment was getting the fuck out of prison.
Right. How long did you end up staying in there, Steve?
The whole time in the system, it was about 4 years. I did a lot of time that didn't count to my sentence, pre-trial and, being bounced around from county jail to county jail, going through jurisdictional issues and all the above. So all totaled, it was about 4 years. I was finally sentenced to 33 months. My first federal indictment read 40 years, no parole. Whoa. Talk about a attention stopper there at 30 years. When I was in that courtroom, this is when I realized, it really dawned on me when I finally got to that federal courtroom, is when they said the United States of America versus Stephen Hupp. And at that moment, that's when my belly dropped all the way down, and I was like, damn. And I started looking around the room, and I realized that I'm the only person in this courtroom that ain't paid by the federal government. Ugh. And so, right then and there, I'm like, I'd beaten up until this point. The reason I got into the federal system, I had beaten the state system, and the state had to drop all my charges, and the feds swooped in and picked it up to keep me from walking free. And that is why the feds got involved. But, even at that time, I knew better than to mess with the feds. Ask John Gotti. He whipped them 4 times, but he still died in prison.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew I wasn't going to play this game at all. I pled guilty. I made a deal with them. Hey, I'll give you all this money back. I'll go auction off things you don't even know about. and, and I'll make sure you get quite a bit of money back. If basically I bought my life back.
Mm-hmm.
And I agreed not to sue the police because they had opened fire on me at my cat. And yeah, it was a 3-hour chase. It wasn't no little thing. And they opened fire on me at 20 feet with a riot gun. Couldn't prove I had any weapons. I was trying to surrender, and that's what put me on the chase. I was one of the first bank robbers released on unsecured bond in 40 years.
Yeah.
And think about it. One of the true criteria to be released on any kind of bond is you can't be an escape risk and you can't be a danger to society. Well, being a bank robber eliminates the last one, and me taking them on a 3-hour chase eliminates the first one.
Mm.
And in court, they still gave me unsecured signature bond. Think about what a miracle that is.
Wow.
And I'm in front of Judge Simpson III. And in the federal Simpson, he's known as a tough judge. They call him the hanging judge. And, so all these things were happening. I remember after I was caught, the capture was, the bank robbery went flawless. The switch from stolen ride to clean ride was flawless. Everything else past that was jacked up. And basically, once they opened fire, I took off. Long story short, long-ass road chase, foot chase after that, police dogs, helicopters, the whole Bonnie and Clyde. Well, after that, I was laying in the cell after I was finally captured, man, hours on foot, just the adrenaline dump alone of robbing a bank, much less shots fired, police chase, and everything behind that. I'm laying under that cell. I'm cramping up. I'm dehydrated. I'm laying under a bunk because Meade County Jail at that moment is under construction and they're heavily overcrowded and they got no space for me at all. And so I'm literally laying on a concrete floor under a bunk. And I'm thinking to myself, why in the fuck am I alive? And why am I don't have a bullet hole one in me? And even then, but I'm clinging to atheism, because that's who I was. That's who's gotten me through. Everything was this rock solid belief that I better enjoy this life because there's nothing else out there. And I had to come to the terms with that something had other plans for me because I knew all the breaks I just had today. I knew what it was to have police officers literally step over top of me during the chase because I'm buried under a hayfield.
Wow.
And trust me, when they caught me, I'm a 10-point buck. They're bouncing me off trees, guns to my head, conflicting orders, and none of it was their fault. Looking back on it now, it was an adrenaline-fueled moment. But at that time, I kind of thought they were trying to kill me.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were giving me conflicting commands. One was hollering to my left, get on your knees, get on your knees. The one was hollering to my right, if you move, I'm going to blow your fucking head off. And all I knew to do, I just dropped on the ground, said, if you shoot me, it'll be in my back.
Yeah.
And from there, we were coming out of the woods. Like I said, by this time, there must, in my mind, there had to have been 80 cops around. That's what was funny to me. This was how much attention this had drew. The cops that cuffed me was railroad police. That's how deep law enforcement was coming during these hours of, you can just imagine going on the radio call, bank robbery, 30 minutes later, shots fired, police chase, tire blown out, trails of spark going down the highway till I stash it near a woods near Fort Knox. And looking back on it today, I almost went into the Fort Knox reservation. Being ex-military, I kind of treated it like sacred ground. I didn't want to involve the Army. I didn't want to go against my brother in arms, so to speak. So I chose not to go into the military reservation at Knox. But if I'd have made that choice, looking back on it today, the police couldn't have followed me into the reservation.
Right. Right, right. It makes you think, right? Like,
but at the heat of the moment, that's what was going through my mind.
mm-hmm.
And anyway, at the long story short, that's what, captured a lot of the attention. And then, of course, my transformation, since working with the medicine, working with people. I look back on it now. I learned the religious law from watching groups in prison revive old religions. And they went from being gangs to being a congregation. And the Bureau of Prison couldn't do anything with them. All of a sudden they had to make room for them. And that touched me with religious law, and as from an atheist point of view, I'm looking at it from a clarity of not this is what I believe at the moment, but wow, look how much power this law does have.
Right. So when we chatted the other day, that was one of the things that stuck out to me, and I think still does. Like, you have evidence from your time in prison showing that this religious protection really does work. Like, you saw it with the gangs, but that's how you are operating in the States, which is pretty incredible. Could you maybe give us a little rundown on your attitude towards like religious law, what you're doing in the States?
I really do feel that, what we're doing is, okay, first I am ex-military, and I did take an oath, that I would defend and protect this Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
What
but now,
branch were you in?
The Army.
Okay.
Now, the reality of it is, as a convicted felon, of course, I can't carry a firearm, and I don't. So, this is how I complete my oath. I've asserted my rights because I'm no longer an atheist. My experiences with ayahuasca, there's no way I can tell anyone I'm an atheist. I interact with the spiritual side of things daily, and it's a very real thing to me now. But at that time, it wasn't, and I was just observing how this religious law pushed back this oppressive organization that has no oversight nowhere, called the Bureau of Prisons at the federal level. And I watched them have to make room for them. So now let's jump ahead. I'm out of prison. I'm stateside. I've got this 2-liter bottle sitting in front of me. I'm sitting there, I've just drank it. 6 days later, man, my life is turned upside down. Everything I thought I now know that I knew nothing. I didn't have a fucking clue of anything. And everything I thought was true, it turned out not to be true, which means everything was possible. When that epiphany hit me that everything was possible, I got to thinking, okay, well, how do I do this, man? How do I bring this to people? Because, it's off the charts what's happening within my body, within my spirit, within my soul. I can't even begin to put it into words. Words are such a blunt tool. And how do I do this, man? Because, if I go out here and, I'm looking around at the churches that are around me and the religions that are around me, and I'm looking around going, man, there's some latitude here. There's some wiggle room, because I'm looking at snake handlers in eastern Kentucky. What they're doing is technically illegal. You're not allowed to catch a wild animal and use it in a service, especially let it inject poison into people. But yet it's been done for many years. So, I'm looking around going, all right, I don't see a path here, because, of course, there's no one here with ayahuasca. So, how do I find a religion that encompasses all spirituality? And and this is what was frustrating me. This was some of the things that I would go to sleep with at night, man, just gnawing on my pillow, if you will. And eventually I would wake up with answers that would point me in directions. In the morning, I'd get up and start reading the news and start Googling. And the next thing you know, I'm reading about Native American treaties. These coincidences, which at that time, that's what I thought they were. I'm like, why? I'd be reading for hours, and then I'd think to myself, why in the hell am I reading this shit? And, but I just kept being nudged back to it. And then I started putting it together. I started reading where, okay, Native American is a broad term we've learned by Hollywood to use to describe a very diverse set of cultures, beliefs, and splinter groups that ain't even documented. Like I was telling, it may have been you or someone earlier in a different interview. Okay, what if I said Caucasian American? What did I just describe? Absolutely nothing. How many cultures, how many religions are described by Caucasian American?
Right.
From Catholic to Protestant to Jew, I could just keep going down the list, and probably many I'm unaware of. And it's the same way when you say that word Native American. There's splinter groups on top of splinter groups, from warfare, from rape, from just conquering. We've been taught by Hollywood in some scenarios that, they were all peace loving and all the above. And it's true. Some of them were, but most of them, they developed just like we were developing, and that was through conquering.
Mm.
And, people come to me a lot of times and they say to me, well, Steve, you're not a traditionalist. And I look at them and go, I never said I was. I never said I was a traditionalist, But here's the thing. I don't want them hating on me either, because I'm not interfering with any of your traditional ceremonies. I'm not trying to rebrand ourselves and say we're new. I'm not trying to use your techniques and say I developed them. We're just doing with what the Spirit has called us to do. And my thing to the traditionalist is, when I look back on history and I look back on Custer, the Sioux didn't step over the repeating rifle and go, oh, that's something modern. That's what the white man built. We better not use it. No, they picked it up and whipped his white fluffy ass with it. I've never seen any indigenous culture that did not have any problem embracing modernism. You look at the indigenous tribes even to this day in the Amazon, and what was in the news recently in India was a tribe on an island that no one goes to, not because the tribe doesn't want them to, it's because they'll kill you. They'll kill you for your clothes.
Right, and I think they made it illegal too because they have no immunity to any of our diseases whatsoever. So.
Yeah, right. There's a
twofold.
It's twofold. Don't get me wrong. There's other reasons, but my point here is when I look back at indigenous beliefs and old shamans, they used what they had to work with, and at the time they had feathers and rattles and drums. And as a modern shaman, I'm doing the same thing. I'm using what I got to work with, and what I have to work with is a stereo, lighting, air conditioning, heat, fire. So I'm really doing nothing any different. I'm just using modern tools. And I'm integrating it with a modern message that reaches us Americans to our heart. Because that shaman that is in the jungle doesn't understand modern life and modern pressures. He doesn't understand PTSD from the battlefield in the military, in the American armed forces. Now, I'm not saying they can't have miraculous results, because they do, and I applaud it. And I applaud anybody that goes to them. The only thing I'm saying is, don't throw rocks at us because we're doing something different. If that's the only reason you're throwing rocks. Now, if you're throwing rocks at me because I'm harming people, or my team is harming people, or you've watched the entire show and you look back and you think we're a fraud, then by all means, hit me in the head with the biggest rock you can find.
I can't imagine somebody watching the show and thinking you're trying to put defraud somebody. It looks extraordinarily authentic. You seem to care to the nth degree. And it seems like you're doing great work. But I saw some threads on my the Psychedelics Today Facebook wall. We got about 1,000 people there, kind of relatively active, and they, the reactions were just kind of like shocking to me. Number one, they're shitting on Kentucky, and I'm like, come on, guys, it's America. Like, cool that you're in San Francisco, but get a grip. There's a huge country here. Like, don't be an asshole about Kentucky. And then number two, like, I think a lot of articles were saying shaman, and people were like going off on the fact that people were using the word shaman. And I'm like, do you just not understand people? Like what the word shaman means and what shamanism is a general thing? It's kind of a pain in the ass.
I don't think people do understand the word shaman, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it comes from a Siberian word, saman, and all it means is to know. And that was the original meaning of the word shaman. Now, the word shaman that we use today has been branded by anthropologists. You know, it really wasn't created as a term until the 1800s, somewhere around there. And I'm sure someone will flame me because I ain't 100% right on the time. But around that era is when the modern word that we know is shaman. But you notice that shamanism is the oldest religion worldwide and globally. And, you know, we're not the new religion. We're just using indigenous beliefs. And I also say to people, you know, I don't have to be Italian to be Catholic.
Right.
And I'm not claiming a native. I'm a broken path shaman. I know exactly what I am. I'm a spirit called broken path shaman. And what that means is I don't have a genetic line to show you where I come from 1,000 years of shamans. No, I'm just like the rest of you. I'm a mutt. I am a mutt of many colors. And for everybody who needs that ancient line, I applaud you. Go to them. But you ain't got to flame us. And yes, Kentucky is a part of the United States. And a lot of great things have come from Kentucky. And a lot of history is here in Kentucky.
Absolutely.
And yes, we get a lot of bad rap, and that's cool too, because sometimes we deserve it. But Kentucky's always had a strange place in a United States history. You know, we survived a civil war by being flexible, by blending many beliefs and many cultures into this melting pot south of the Ohio River. And we did it as humanely as possible. And yet I can tell you the dark history of Kentucky. This was the last place a public lynching was held in 1938 in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. And I use it all the time in ceremony to also show how much progress we have really made in one generation when we went from a time of bringing our children to watch somebody being hung from the neck and burned alive. Because a lynching wasn't a nice, clean execution. It was throwing a rope over a limb and dropping them into a fire. And when they quit kicking, you knew they were dead. And cops watched. I mean, you can look it up online. You can sit there and see the photos in Hopkinsville, Kentucky in 1938. And that was a publicly condoned murder.
Right.
And that's how far we've come, though. But that's also the diverse beliefs here in Kentucky. You know, people ask me all the time, dude, how are you doing this deep in the Bible Belt? And I don't look at it that I'm deep in the Bible Belt. I look at it like I'm in a spiritually charged environment.
I drew an analogy the other day, Steve, that okay, so ayahuasca, people always say, oh, you should go do it in the Amazon, right? Because it's like, that's where the spirit of the thing is. That's where like so much life is. And then I started thinking about Kentucky, how much humidity is there, how much heat is there, and how much real life is in Kentucky. And I kind of saw a sort of analogy there, perhaps not a rainforest, but still incredible amount of biodiversity, incredible amount of life and beauty. And I don't know. It's something in passing I thought I would mention.
Oh, and I thank you. And another thing I want to let people know about the Native American history of Kentucky, no tribe claimed this area. And the reason was, I theorize, is because Kentucky's in this river valley. We have people with allergies have tremendous hardships here. You know, they get headaches. A lot of things happen. Well, the Native Americans at the time, the Iroquois, the Cherokee, they attribute it to evil spirits, and they called this the dark and bloody ground. And that's why Daniel Boone was able to establish a settlement here with very little bloodshed, because none of them lived here. They only hunted. And that also gives it, for us, huge spiritual properties. And it also allowed us to set up in a place that we're not stepping on anybody's toes.
Right.
You know, I could understand some of the tribes getting upset with us if I was here in Kentucky and going, "Hey, I'm ready to start a casino." No, but what all we want to do is help you with your meth and heroin addiction that is eating the tribes up on these reservations. And the reverse racism won't allow us to do it because they won't even talk to us because we're not Native American.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and that's what we experience a lot of times is reverse racism. Now we shrug it off. We let it roll off us like a water off a duck's back. But that's what we're also working against too. Because, part of becoming whole in this world is all of us sitting down and going, "Hey man, what can we learn from one another?" In my criminal life, I helped usher in this uncompassionate world that we're living in now. That is the weight that I carry on my shoulders every day. Every day I look around and I see somebody trying to get ahead, trying to slit a throat to climb on the body, trying to beat the rat race. I see myself and I see where I was, and I also know what I was willing to do to get ahead. But you know what? That wasn't keeping the roads open. That's what made me totally turn around when I recognized my way wasn't building hospitals and schools. My way wasn't going to help my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren. And my way wasn't going to help this world heal. And if we don't start helping our little blue sphere heal, it's all we got.
It's incredibly fragile. Could you kind of talk about what that transition was like from that kind of survival mindset in prison to like a more mission oriented life, I guess, is a decent way of putting it?
Yeah, I kind of look at it like, okay, a fulfilling life, a purpose-filled life. I have a purpose now. Before the only purpose was make as much money as I could, get as high as I could, have as much sex as I could, and just keep that ugly ball rolling. At times it was a fun wheel. Don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, it was unfulfilling. I remember one of my best heists. I ain't going to go too deep into it, but let's just say I'm sitting in a motel room. I'm looking at this pile of money I got piled on the bed. I'm a state away from where I'd done it, so I'm reasonably safe. And after the adrenaline started to fade, I'm looking at this pile of money and I'm thinking, man, I just risked everything again for this pile of dirty paper that is meaningless. That is absolutely meaningless. But I'm so hooked now, I can't quit. There is no quitting. And that was a really powerful moment for me because all of a sudden it wasn't fun anymore. But I recognized how deep I was addicted to the rush, the adrenaline, the lifestyle, and the egotistical point of view that I feel that I was smarter than everybody else. Because outside of a month out of a year in time, everybody else got up at 6 a.m, braved the weather, did the right thing, and I got to sleep in. So that transition, trying to take you to that mindset, to be honest with you, I was more scared transitioning into this than any bank that I ever walked into, than any crime that I ever committed. And why? Because I had to put my name on this. I had to say, I am Steve Hupp. This is where I live. This is what I'm going to do, and this is where I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it with a Class 1 controlled substance, and I dare you to stop me. And I was terrified because not only that, I'm putting my family's lives in chaos's hands, for lack of a better word, and I'm trusting things that I couldn't even tell anybody about, but they're communicating with me. And they're communicating with me vibrationally now. And not only am I being guided, but I'm being given more free reign, more influence. Because now the universe is starting to trust me, and I'm starting to trust it. It's starting to relax with me, and I'm starting to relax with it. And I know this sounds so corny, but it's the reality. It's my reality. It's my truth. And it's only mine. But I'm going to tell you, I came to a place of peace once I got past the fear, the foreboding, and once I fully embraced what I had already no choice but to embrace, and that is the universe, the creator, the source, the God, whatever verbiage you want to put on it, that created me is going to take me out of this world whichever day it chooses, and all I can do is live each day like it's my last. Now, that ain't nothing new. That's been screamed from every mountaintop since man could speak a word. But you know, they were just words to me until that experience, until many other experiences post that. And now I live a fulfilling life. Now I totally trust the universe. You know, I've given my confession on film for 11 episodes if they want to come at me. But you know, the reason I think they're not going to come at me or haven't came at me like this is because they know my intent. And my intent is not to build a cult. We are not an apocalyptic cult. We are a cult of life, if you want to call us a cult. Because I believe we are at the dawn of a brand new world. And I believe we got to put our mental focus, our mental energy into manifesting this brave, wonderful new world. And I don't believe we're in the sixth mass extinction. How bad was the other five? We're here. You know, I see all this fear mongering out here. And you know what I had to shake off me was that fear. And when I lost that fear of not being accepted, that fear of being rejected, that fear of laying down my security blanket of crime, because that's what I had to do this. Because there was no longer a ski mask, there was no longer theatrical makeup. I had to put my head in the guillotine and dare someone to pull the lever.
Yeah. So it's like I'm a student of a lot of different kind of esoteric religions, and that story you kind of play out there is really a classic story of transcendence.
And I'm so glad you used that word esoteric, because the other day someone asked me, how would you describe your organization? What your vision? And in a word, I'd have to describe it as exoteric. And the reason is it's for everybody.
Yeah.
You know, this ain't about a secret society. This ain't about if you don't have a cover charge of 10 grand, you can't have a seat. We're all in this together. And what I'd like to say to people out there who's listening, if you were fortunate enough to have an abundance in your life, kick some to help others who haven't. Because I look back on my life, I came from a middle-class family. I had no excuse to be who I was. None. But there's a lot of people out there who are great people, living in trailer parks, living in public and government housing, who, yes, they have rotten teeth. Why? Because have you ever went out here and priced dental work? I'm getting ready to go through it right now.
It's brutal.
That's why you hear, and it's incredibly high. But you know, they're still good people. They still got great ideas. You know how many people told me when I first started off with this, dude, you're never going to do this. Dude, you're a plastic shaman. Man, you're a fake. You're wrong. You are so wrong. But you know what the other side kept telling me every time I journeyed? Steve, you just keep doing what you're doing. Don't look up. Don't look up. We got your back. Nobody is going to come at you. And that's exactly what I did. I just kept holding ceremonies. I kept hunting people to help. And I didn't give a damn what the haters said. I didn't care who had other motives and agendas to put us down for whatever reason they want. In fact, we welcome the conversation. We welcome the conversation from all points of view. And to me, there is no addicts out here. There's no haters. There's only out of balance human beings. And it expresses itself in some very ugly forms.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're here to help. I hate the word addict. I know we have to use it sometimes because that's what people grasp onto quickly. But man, it's such a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I read a book recently that talked about the naming of addiction, and it's really problematic. Because you're right, it's kind of just self-referential and kind of keeps people a little trapped in that world.
Well, it also gives them a security blanket, because they say in their mind, "Oh, my addiction's worse than everybody else." I don't know how many I've heard come through us and go, "Man, you know I'm on meth, right?" And I look at them and like, "Yeah, and." You know, meth ain't no worse than heroin. Heroin ain't no worse than meth. Crack ain't worse than heroin or meth or combined. You are an out of balance human being, and this is what you're grabbing to, trying to get back into balance, that is slinging you with centrifugal force from one end of the spectrum to the other.
I heard a term the other day, you might like it, drug chauvinism. So one thing being better or worse than another.
Yeah, there you go.
Could be helpful for later.
Yeah, definitely one to keep in the arrow quiver there. But, you know, and I see this all the time. And, and once I get them through that first cup and they recognize that the drug is not the problem. The problem is the guilt. The problem is the self-loathing. The problem is you like the initial rush, and you're not a bad person for loving dopamine, because dopamine is the drug we're all hooked on. And we all get it in some form, way, shape. It's just some of us chose a chemical route.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Like the we're a pretty simple machine carrying around these souls we are, and they're pretty much all the same chemicals, like run into all these different patterns we're playing out in our lives. So yeah, I totally agree with you there.
Yeah, I had a counselor one time tell me in prison, we were talking somewhat like this, and he was like, it's funny that you bring that up, because he was like, there's so many people, yet so few stories. And,
yeah.
And, I really laid back in my cell and thought about that after him and our session was over. And I was like, ain't that the truth? Think about the billions of people out here. But the common threads among us all, love, betrayal, treachery, there's really only a handful of stories repeating themselves over and over and over. And it's really deep when you think about, what if I just changed one of those threads in my story? Just one. How big of an impact is it going to have on your life and what you're going to manifest?
Right.
Because that was one of my biggest transitional challenges, if you will, was knowing what manifestation looked like when it happened. That box against my wall taught me as a child and Bewitched that if I can't wiggle my nose and it doesn't immediately happen, it ain't real. And it also taught me in my deepest core that magic is fake because it was portrayed in a fictional show. When really you start looking back at indigenous cultures before TV, mass media, who had a very strong connection with nature and the land, and all the lessons are right there around us. But because we have a thermostat, we have unplugged from those lessons. Because we have a steering wheel and a gear shift that makes us go, we don't have to plan what's the weather for tomorrow to get to work, or can I walk up that hill, or what can I carry up that hill. Think about what that indigenous person learned at maybe 19 years old, watching his family starve to death because he made a wrong decision. But because we live to 70 and 80 in our pampered ass lives, we think we're smarter.
Mm-hmm.
And when really, I sat down not too long ago with this piece of rock, and I was going to see how hard flint napping was. And let me tell you, 5 hours later, I was so glad to throw that shit down and give up.
I'm sure you had some blisters.
Oh, I had blisters, cuts on my hands. I mean, and a few new swear words, and all, ones I even made up in the heat of the moment. And then I realized the intelligence it took to be Stone Age.
Oh yeah.
That that the things that we just take for granted, like a hammer, they had to think it all the way through. And they did it with no helmets, no knee pads, no reset buttons, and the game was brutal. And live or die was every day. Every day. And if you misstepped in the game, you got to watch the things that you love the most die the most horrible ways. That was life. That is life.
So how are you, when you think about ayahuasca, do you, are you on the side, I don't really think it's a side, of the view that ayahuasca is trying to teach these, kind of the way Dennis McKenna talks about it. You guys are just monkeys with sharp teeth. You got a lot to learn from these plants. Like, how do you kind of think of this plant teacher ayahuasca?
The one, the relationship that I have with what I call mother, which is what a lot of calls ayahuasca, Mother Aya, but for me, we are intergalactic little children. Okay. To them, they laugh at us all the time. They laugh at me all the time. And it's because we are so focused on these imaginary lines in the sand. The reality of our planet is we could feed everybody on the planet now in the landmass of Texas with current hydroponic technology. So they look at us, here we're jockeying on these imaginary lines in the sand that we like to call borders. But where my piece lies is, how did the indigenous people get through all this? They went to where the resources are, and that's what they're trying to show us, that we need to go. We need some, common sense says if something works, you don't always have to know why. If a plant hooks you, that means plants can heal you. I always use the analogy, if a stone can kill you, uranium, then a stone can heal you. So none of these things are outlandish, but what Mother's trying to get across to us, and what she's just now stepping into modern consciousness in a big way, is that we really have to come back to be kind to one another. First of all, we have a choice every day to either be kind or hateful. And we really do. Every day I drive out my drive, I can either start cutting and slicing and dicing my way through traffic, which sometimes I do because sometimes I need to get somewhere and I'm a jerk. But most times I try to make a conscious effort to not do that. That don't make me good. That don't make me better. That just means I'm older. I'm 53. And I remember back in a time when people used to let you out into traffic. People waved at you, said hello, good morning, polite, opened doors for one another, just because it was just how we all got along. And with that same mindset, we stormed the beaches of Normandy. We didn't have Social Security. We didn't expect the government to take care of all of our ills and woes. And we fought a war on two continents, or two fronts. Man, the great things that we have accomplished in the last 100 years as humanity is huge. But Mother also wants us to understand that just striving to be the most violent is not integration. It's not becoming whole. And nothing is going to present themselves to us in a real and meaningful way intergalactically until we get past this barbaric attitude of domination. Now, I'm not saying we're going to get there really quick, but I guarantee it, if you were standing in that crowd in 1938 in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, you would have never thought a black man would have had his finger on our nuclear arsenal. Would you?
Right.
And that was within one lifetime. That huge shift happened. So I know the shift that I'm trying to bring about, that I'm trying to help Mother bring about, that others are working just as hard as we are all across the world I know I'm never going to see the end. I can't beat the math. I'm 53.
Right.
But I also know I got grandchildren and children out there who probably will never speak to me, or I may never see for a myriad of reasons. But I got to try to leave them a better world than the one that I found. And if we all took a mindset that maybe rather than looking for paradise on the other side and some place to sit on God's lap and play with his beard, how about we make a pact to come back here for one more lifetime? Would you have a whole different meaning on how you want to leave this world if you thought you were never coming back than if you'd made plans to come back?
I've never heard it said that way, Steve. So you have the Bodhisattva vow where you're going to come back forever until everybody's liberated. And then, that's a little more moderate. One time, I'm good with that.
I agreed. I agreed for one more ride in my mindset with Mother. And what's one more time? I want to see the end. Not maybe the end of this, but I want to see it progress. And what if you had to come back through your genetic line? How would you treat your kids? What would you teach them?
Yeah.
And what would you teach them to teach your grandchildren? And I guarantee it, we wouldn't be handing them trillions of dollars in national debt.
Yeah.
We would find that totally unacceptable. And we would refuse to go to work until it was fixed. See, that's nonviolent change. Oh my God, what a manifestation. What if we collectively manifested accountability in our government, accountability among our law enforcement officers who do a very difficult job in a very clouded and murky world?
Mm-hmm.
But then everybody would know where they stood. Man, what a thought there.
Yeah. In this kind of psychedelic world, people really, really, really get a little too aggressive about law enforcement, in my opinion. Like, while I don't appreciate everything they do, it is a horrific job. And it twists them, tries them.
If they would sit in the cages like I have and heard the stories of what a lot of people have gotten away with and not what they were caught for, you would hug every cop you walk by. I went through Hurricane Andrew and there was no law enforcement there after that for 30 days. And let me tell you, it was utter chaos.
Man.
And I've seen it in other parts of the world. And we need them. Trust me, I don't agree with everything that's gone on either, by no means. Okay, I've been the one beat up. I've been the one bounced off trees and lied to in interrogations and all the above. But I understand, looking back on it, why it was done.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes there is that necessary element of evil, if you will. But the other side is, though, I don't think our law enforcers should be able to have more power than our soldiers at war. Our soldiers in Iraq can't fire just because they're in fear for their life. They have to wait till they're fired upon to return fire.
Right.
And I don't think that's too much to ask of our law enforcement.
Right. Given how many people have been shot in the back by the police, I think you're onto something there. Absolutely.
And I also believe that there's a peaceful way of doing that. Look at our insurance industry. How can we work this industry into our law enforcement? And this is just a thought I had and a thought other people had that we had talked about in ceremony. But what if we made it where, the insurance company regulated the police force? In other words, that cop had to have a bond or an insurance card. And I guarantee it, he wouldn't get 30 complaints before somebody reviewed him if that insurance company had to pay $1 million in a civil suit. I guarantee it, that insurance company's, once he gets one or two complaints, just like you and your driver's license.
Right. Yeah.
The whole system's right there. You ain't got to make any changes. Don't cost a lot. And it will be self-governing?
Right, yeah.
And it would be fair because the good cops would stay on board. Because they're just as affected by the bad cop as we are.
Right.
But anyway,
yeah.
we have other avenues. We just have to explore more.
What do you do you think
the them versus
go
us?
Ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say I'm just trying to get away from the them versus us.
Right. It's all
because
us.
It's all us.
Yeah. It's right off the soap bottle. It's all one. And
all one. Exactly. So, I got nothing for you there.
So the I guess in terms of like influence, I think you're probably on the brink of influencing a lot of people. Perhaps 1 million plus with being on Vice. And are you seeing kind of your mission being taken up by others?
Well, what we're putting together right now is Shaman University because, right now it's the Wild West. No one's ever done any of this. So there's no precedent. There's no structure, which for someone like me allowed me to excel really quickly because there wasn't none of that for how to rob a bank either. So with that being said, what we want to do is we got to put together a structure that makes this progress safely. That we can identify operators with less than ethical intentions and somehow get them out of the, how would you say, aosphere. We need to self-govern the operators out here. Right now, it's, if you got enough nerve and you think you got enough legal theory, you can plant your flag and ride. A lot of people have tried, and many have failed. What I see coming is, yes, I do see this blowing up. I do see the influence, and we want to be a part of that structure, laying the right foundation for people to safely do it. I guarantee it. We have the strongest protocols, bar none, of any organization out here doing it. And we developed them all ourselves with it through experience. This ain't something we watched a YouTube video on. This is by doing ceremonies in motels and campgrounds and with people who are severely addicted with severe diseases. And I mean, real-time issues going on. And we didn't do it hoping that God would cure them. We did it in a safe way that would allow them to step through that threshold and work with the real healers, which are on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
You see, I tell everybody, you can go online, anybody can brew ayahuasca.
Right.
It ain't brain surgery by no means. But what you got to do to be a shaman or shamanista or a medicine person is, will the other side work with you, and have you accumulated the right ones to work with you? Because it's no different than here. You got some people that out there on that street corner that you're standing next to that may have bodies being decapitated in their refrigerator in their apartment, and you don't know. They're that far out of balance. Or you could have a person to your right, which could be the savior of your world if you just talk to them. You see, and it's the same way on the other side. You don't really have evil. I've never experienced what I would call evil. What I have experienced, though, is immature spirits. I've experienced some spirits who were trying to gain experience and really didn't know what they were doing, and you kind of had to filter through them, no different than if you were in a nightclub.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. I've spent time in the Western version of shamanism, and that's, I think, the most mature attitude. It's like these things aren't necessarily evil; they're just at their current stage of development. And
right. What I tell people all the time, just because you experience something in your journey and they're not resonating with you, does not mean that they're evil or you're bad or you're doing something wrong. It just means right then you're not vibrationally in sync.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. So Steve, we're at about an hour now. I would give you a few minutes to kind of, I don't know, do any pitches that you want to do, or tell people how to find more out about you.
I really don't have any pitches I want to do. I mean, if you don't know who we are after Vice and all the above, you probably too silly to find you a plane ticket. So,
right.
you know what I mean? So where would you like to use this? I'll leave it to you. Where would you like to use it?
So, I definitely just recommend people, at the very least, check out the first episode if you can find it. Probably YouTube, Vice.com. Go over somebody's house with cable and watch it there. It's like on demand, just about everywhere. That's how I got it. It was at my parents' house. So, So I think, people need to understand that there's a huge diversity here in the psychedelic world, in the healing plants world, and shamanism. An incredible amount of diversity and an incredible amount of healing to be had in almost all modes of that. And, check it out. I think it's really helpful to see how Steve's doing it and to learn from that. And, if you feel so inclined, then you can dig deeper.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. And I think that's a good way to put it. Check us out, ayaquest.com, AYAQUEST.com. And also check out others. But, man, before anybody picks a place, either in Peru or America or wherever, check out the place. Make sure they're safe. Go online. Not only Google the name of the place, Google the name of the medicine people behind it. See what comes up. Make sure they know how to handle a medical emergency. And, again, follow your heart. Follow your gut. Always. With that, peace and progression.
Thank you, Steve. And until the next time we speak, thanks for joining us on Psychedelics Today.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
And there you have it. Steve Hupp, Kentucky Ayahuasca, Ayaquest. Check them out on Vice. Really interesting first episode. I wish them the best in their project. I really hope it works out. And really, really actually kind of inspiring. I think people should really look at that model and see how they can, potentially emulate or collaborate or get some more training or something like that. There is a substantial amount of religious protection in the U.S. and perhaps we're not living up to it. So, learn, dig in, see what you can do. And that's it. Probably not too much debriefing there, but maybe email us over at psychedelicstoday, email@gmail.com with any feedback, or you could check us out on the Facebook group, Psychedelics Today group on Facebook, and you can chime in and have conversation with other listeners. About 1,000 of us there having some pretty fun conversations. So check it out. If you want to support the show, the best way is probably to buy one of our classes. So check it out, psychedelicstoday.com. There's links up there to our classes. And the best way to improve this psychedelic movement of ours, I think, is to get as much education as you can around this stuff. And reading books, taking classes are a great way to do that. And we really need the help. We've got increasing bills here as we're trying to grow. So anything you can do to help us out would be amazing, from buying a shirt on our shop to checking out some of our ebooks, or even becoming a patron over at patreon.com/psychedelics today. We'd love to have you chip in $1 or $2 or whatever you can afford per month. So yeah, check that one out, patreon.com/psychedelics today. We are also offering coaching services. So Kyle and I are available for coaching. If you want to talk to us, there's a place on psychedelicstoday.com where you can book coaching, consulting sessions. We could talk about anything you want, as long as we're in the realm of legality. We're in good shape. So we're not bound by any licensure. We can give you really direct and honest feedback and advice and all that. And hopefully that's of interest. And just know that it's an available resource for you. So this is Joe Moore signing off from Breckenridge, Colorado. Psychedelics Today. We'll see you next time.